Hello classy people, this is Josh the Top Hat Gamer, and this week I'm reviewing Dishonored 2. 2012 was a solid year for video games, and one of the best new properties to come out that year was Dishonored, an action RPG with a focus on stealth gameplay that stood out with its flexible gameplay and distinct visual style. Flash forward 4 years and we've finally got our hands on its sequel. Let's find out if Dishonored 2 lives up to the lofty expectations set by the original. Much like the original, Dishonored 2 is set in the fictional Empire of Isles, and it puts you in control of either Emily Kaldwin, the Empress of Dunwall, or her father Corvo, the royal protector and protagonist of the previous game. During a royal ceremony, a witch known as Delilah Copperspoon incites a coup, accusing Emily and Corvo of a number of political assassinations while claiming to be Emily's estranged aunt, and the true heir to the throne. Whichever character you choose to play as is forced to escape their home and seek refuge in the coastal city of Karnaca, and it's in this rundown corner of the kingdom that our hero of choice is able to hunt down and dispose of Delilah's various co-conspirators. Dishonored 2 is a fairly standard revenge story, and while trying to reclaim the throne is a decent source of motivation, the various twists and turns the plot takes leaves much to be desired. Luckily, Dishonored 2's world building is as captivating as ever, and its playable characters are much more interesting than in the original. I found it particularly interesting to see Emily grow from a naive, sheltered royal into someone with more wisdom and responsibility towards her people. Keep in mind that was over one low chaos playthrough as Emily, and there are a few changes here and there depending on which character you pick and how you choose to play. Thankfully, the world of Dishonored 2 is one that I've enjoyed exploring multiple times over, mostly due to its distinct art style and fitting sound design. While it's certainly not the most technically impressive game around, Dishonored 2's exaggerated character designs and memorable levels certainly leave an impression. And although Dishonored 2 is no longer set within the bleak grey walls of Dunwall, it maintains its forlorn tone with washed out colours and rundown structures. The game manages to fit the same mood as the original, while still looking distinct when put side by side with it. Dishonored 2's audio design is similarly competent and maintains much of the steampunk-inspired dark soundtrack found in the original game, but with a distinctly coastal feel added thanks to the periodic inclusion of mandolin motifs throughout the game. Constant droning complements the game's stark visuals, and the buzzing of light gates and guards' footsteps will keep you constantly on edge. Finally, the game's voice acting is adequate, though there's not a whole lot to write home about. Rosario Dawson provides the voice for one of your constant companions, and while that's cool and all, she doesn't really shine in the role. Of the various famous faces to lend their voice to Dishonored 2, the only one that really adds anything in particular is Vincent D'Onofrio, whose pompous articulation helps to build resentment for the penultimate enemy in the game. Additionally, the protagonists are both voiced, unlike the previous game, and this helps us to get to know them better as characters, instead of trying to interpret the blank slate that was Corvo Attano in Dishonored 1. If you played the first Dishonored game, then you'll probably find much of Dishonored 2's visual and audio design distinct yet familiar. The gameplay is similarly familiar, but different, as it provides the same exploration-heavy RPG as the original, but with many more powers and abilities at your disposal. Much like the original, the name of the game is Choice, allowing you to play stealth or action-oriented styles, while also giving you the option to go completely non-lethal or kill everyone in sight. Playing through the game with either style is made incredibly simple thanks to each character's diverse range of powers, from their traversal abilities that give them access to out-of-reach locations, to more character-specific abilities like Domino or Possession, which let you dispatch numerous enemies at once, or possess other creatures to avoid detection, respectively. The basic mechanics are shared by each character, and the game's core stealth is fairly user-friendly, as it's easy to identify when you're hidden or not. The combat is similarly simple, yet made extremely satisfying thanks to the combination of spectacular takedowns and emphatic slow-motion effects. Lastly, enemy AI is about as responsive as expected, and manipulating their attention to drive them towards traps or away from your goals is easy and fun. Whether you choose to go silently or with all-out assault, Dishonored 2 allows you to tailor your skills, arsenal, and equipable bone charms throughout the course of the game, and it encourages most builds with its expansive levels filled with multiple paths for progression. The level design is a highlight in Dishonored 2, as much of what makes the game so engrossing is being able to search the world from top to bottom for clues and secrets to help you progress further. Perhaps you'll find a code or a key to unlock an unprotected door, or perhaps you'll find a vent that allows you to move forward if you possess a rat to crawl through it. There's honestly so much to see in each level, even without talking about its numerous collectible runes and bone charms, and the sheer number of options available at any given time is impressive to say the least. And I haven't even mentioned the Clockwork Mansion, which is a masterclass of interactive level design on its own. It takes the idea of memorizing level layouts and exploring the world that is present in most other levels and turns it on its head, giving players a constantly shifting environment full of secrets and hidden paths. Even with the huge number of powers and paths available to you, the game avoids letting you become overpowered, usually by adding new enemies or obstacles to force you to rethink your usual plan of attack. This is most noticeable with the Clockwork Soldiers, an enemy who senses your presence differently to normal guards. Foes and obstructions like this mean that you'll need to switch up your strategy sometimes, keeping the gameplay challenging. For the most part, the gameplay remains interesting and challenging. The only real problem I had with the game is one particular section that disables your abilities in favor of a brand new, one-time use mechanic, which is still pretty cool, but seems out of place if I'm being honest. As cool as it is shifting between timelines in a single location, taking away the player's carefully cultivated suite of powers and throwing them in the deep end feels disempowering, despite the new mechanic allowing for some otherwise overpowered shenanigans. In any other game, like Titanfall 2 for instance, this mechanic would be highly entertaining, but in Dishonored 2 it feels like a gameplay shift that didn't really need to happen. Like I said, it's still pretty cool, but it seems out of place here. Even with the inclusion of this one weird level-specific mechanic, Dishonored 2 is a great deal of fun. It's also a huge amount of content, especially if you take your time exploring the world and collecting all its various upgrades and equipable gear. Honestly, single levels could take me up to an hour or two simply because I was intent on scouring it from top to bottom, and it's genuinely a world that's worth exploring. Also because Emily and Corvo not only have a couple of unique powers but slight narrative differences, and it's worth playing through the game's 10 chapters at least a couple of times. A worthy successor to the original, Dishonored 2 brings the same play-away style to the table but adds plenty more in terms of available powers, weapons, and sheer exploration options. Though the plot may not offer much in terms of complexity, and the gameplay stumbles briefly by taking away your carefully chosen powers for a spell, Dishonored 2 continues to build its fascinating world by providing a handful of interesting characters and side stories along the way. Dishonored 2 gets the Top Hat Gamer rating of excellent. No playthrough is the same with so many powers, weapons, and paths on offer, and while the gameplay slips up in one section in particular, Dishonored 2 is thoroughly enjoyable regardless. If you're a fan of steampunk or RPGs that offer a good deal of freedom, or if you love the original, then you're likely to find something to love with Dishonored 2. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the review informative. If you missed last week's review on Titanfall 2, click the annotation. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm off to drop in on some guards again.